Awesome. So
Mhm.
great timing. Thank you guys. So what is mold? That's the big question. We've probably seen it in our house. And to be honest, if you look hard enough in any property in a dark crevice corner, there's probably some amount of mold, right? So our goal today is to kind of cut through the filler and tell you what's a problem, what's not, and just educate everyone on mold. So mold's considered a subgroup of the fungi kingdom. Remember, all mold is fungi, but not all fungi is mold. The best thing to remember is it's in our homes, it's in our cars, it's in our workplace, it's everywhere. It's on our clothes, on our pets. We carry it in on our shoes. It's a naturally occurring part of the environment. There's no such other than like a sterile lab as a place where there's no mold spores around. Like I said, it can be found almost anywhere where there's moisture and oxygen present. You're going to find some mold. And also remember that water is the problem, mold is the symptom. So cause and effect. You guys are going to want to remember that for later. Molds can thrive on any organic matter, including clothing, paper, ceilings, leather, personal items, walls, floors that have moisture problems. And we're going to have some great photos today. So if you see the slides, it kind of is going to correlate to each topic. So that's the general intro of what mold is. So how big is mold? You guys can see this diagram's a little fuzzy, but if you look on the far right, you'll see a big blue. It almost looks like these are planets, but there's sizes of different materials. So a rainwater droplet down from that, plant spores, and then fungus spores. You can see bacteria, viruses, that kind of small. So we're talking very, very small in scale. And so when you see mold on a wall or on some clothing or something, it's gotten obviously bigger. So these are the small individual spores, if you will. So just to give you some context on how their size is relative to other things. So very small. And what are some common types of mold? We've all watched the news before and we've heard black mold or toxic mold. There's a huge, huge environment out there, a lot of different types. So when if you did 10 different mold reports at 10 different properties, you're going to see a wide variety of types, species, IDs, some common ones, Stachybotrys, which is that black mold or toxic mold. There's Aspergillus, Penicillium, Chaetonium, Cladosporium. This is just a small list. The big encompassing list is much, much larger. So these are just a few keywords or common types that you'd find in your house or a client's house.
Dane, I have a question for you. Can I
Sure.
always tell what kind of mold it is if I look at the color?
Great question. So Google is our best friend and our worst friend sometimes. So just by, looking or taking a photo and sending it in to like us or a mold remediation company saying, hey, it's green or it's black or it's white and it's fuzzy, different types of mold can present in different colors and variations depending on the conditions. So it's not a one-to-one by looking at it and you can ID it on the spot just on visuals, right? That's where the sampling comes into play. And so you can look at two different kinds and they might present a little differently in two different spaces. So, next thing, what are our guidelines, right? Many of you that work in our area are familiar with radon, right? It's a pass fail, that 4.0 level with radon. It's nice and binary, it's clean. We kind of know what are heightened levels and what are not so worrisome levels. Currently, with mold in the EPA, there's no standard that's been set yet. So there's no standards or threshold value limits. And there's a lot of reasons for that. So with concentrations of mold spores, none of that has been set yet by the EPA. Who requires licensure? So Maryland and Virginia, to do sampling or a mold investigation, you really don't need to have a state license. DC does have some requirements. The thing to keep in mind is that, what we say is, and this will be relevant later, a lot of times the best mold inspectors are home inspectors. Because there's no standards, you really want to make sure you're using a reputable company that knows, is very familiar, has done a lot of research and training, and have their staff trained up. Our team is all IAC2 certified, which is the International Association of Indoor Air Consultants. So that's for radon and mold. So we like to, do our standards with the rest of the industry, whether we're doing a sampling and inspection or writing protocol for mold that we've found. We like to keep everything as up to standard as possible since there's no EPA standards. So there's a lot of organizations and licensure and certifications that you can get, but none of it is state or nationally mandated. Only if you're a remediation specialist, that's when you have to have some licensure. So how does this apply to you? And we're going to try to tie this back to real estate. Obviously, that's why most of us are on this call. So you can have a variety of situations, right? Is it for a client that's buying a house, selling, or maybe a client that bought 5 years ago and that's living in a house that you sold them? The first example, clients live in a house or clients that you have are selling their house. Obviously, they're usually living there still. You want to consult a mold inspector or a remediation professional if you know there's an issue. The big thing is getting an unbiased opinion or multiple opinions so that you can narrow down what the cost is going to be or what the impact or scope at the property. And this is, remember, for clients living in a house or selling and living in a house. With some scale mold issues, which is very common for us, where we'll get calls where the sky is falling and then we get there and it's not that big a deal. With small scale issues that are isolated in a bathroom, sometimes you don't need to, shut down the whole house to get it fixed. Sometimes the actual owners or the landlord can do it themselves. Not all cases, but we want to remember that it's all relative and to have some perspective on what the professionals are telling you after they've given you, their recommendations and see what the correct action is. Now, the second example, if you're buying a house, right, you always want to ask the sellers or the agents, right, is there any history of water events, moisture, mold, anything that they can deduce, from, disclosures or any information you can get is helpful. Getting a mold evaluation in the course of a contingency deadline, it can be hard to go from, I think there's mold, to getting it looked at, to quantifying how much is this going to cost. Your goal as an agent, in my opinion, and everyone feels differently about this, is to get a sense, is this a large scale, like whole house mold problem, or is this a small manageable thing? The biggest thing to remember with mold, it's not the end of the world, and every house has some mold in it. It's just trying to figure out, is it a large scale project or something that's reasonable? Remember, all problems have solutions, and mold is very common and can be fixed most of the time. It's not something usually to walk away from. Every situation is different, but keep in mind, mold happens, mold grows, it's everywhere, it's in our lives. It is a fixable problem. So this is a great example. Keep it in perspective, right? You can see these two photos on the screen. I get calls at least once a week for the example on the left, where someone will either read a news article or talk to their neighbor, and they say, I have some spotting on my bath tiles. I think my whole house has mold, and we probably should go get a hotel for the weekend. Not always the case. So obviously on the left, small scale, isolated, usually just from high moisture and humidity. On the right photo, right, foreclosed upon house, possibly big gut remodel. This is a whole, PPE, very big scale project on the right versus the left. You can probably go to your grocery store, get some cleaning solutions, and take care of this yourself. So keep it in perspective and always call professionals. If you don't know or you feel like you're in over your head, get someone that's qualified to come give you an unbiased opinion to let you know where you can start fixing problems and where maybe things are too big and you need to call someone else. So next slide, right? What do we do if we suspect mold? So whether this is your own house or a client's house, first thing is look for evidence, right? Is there evidence of moisture? Is there staining, high humidity? Obviously, smells and odors. Sometimes basements are just dusty, musty, stagnant smelling. It doesn't always mean there's mold, right? It's below grade. There's always going to be higher levels of moisture and humidity. Keep that in mind, right? Standing water, anything related to water, right? Mold needs water and conditions conducive to mold to grow. So the first step is looking for evidence or conditions to then go to the next level, right? Once you think you might have a problem, you're going to want to write everything down or get as much information as possible to give to an expert, right? Whether that's a licensed home inspector who also does mold inspections, or companies such as Peak and Protect that specializes in mold inspections, sampling, and protocol. Call someone that knows what they're doing. They're going to investigate, get some testing, and give you results and recommendations for either you or your clients. Step three, right? Say you've had someone come give you an opinion, right? They've suggested some remediation, or maybe it's not elevated and it's just surface mold that's very isolated. And step three is going to be the remediation process, which is PPE, closed house conditions, removing affected materials from the home, cleaning, restoration, and then rehab of materials if anything gets removed. Think like drywall, wood framing, personal items, carpet, that kind of stuff. Once that part of the process is finished, you would likely have someone come in that's independent to do a final air sampling to verify that there's no elevated levels left in the property. And step five is my favorite. Enjoy a healthy home. Everything's buttoned up and clean, and you can go about your life and not worry about the air you're breathing. So, uh, doubling back. So what's the mold inspection process look like? So maybe we have a client or our own house. We have a basement that's suspect, right? We think we might have a problem. Now we've called a professional, right? They're going to come assist you in this process saying, hey, this is over our heads. We need to know, is this a big scale project? Is this isolated? 9 times out of 10, it's manageable and there's a solution, right? So a mold inspection is a visual, non-invasive inspection of either a specific area, think like basement or this one bedroom, or it's a non-invasive inspection of the entire property. We call that a full property mold assessment or mold investigation. Obviously looking for possible microbial growth, spotting, discoloration, fuzzy stuff on the walls, right? And obviously we're looking for the potential sources. So not just where's the mold, but maybe why is the mold growing, or why is the possible microbial growth, as you'll see in a lot of reports. Until the lab confirms it's mold, you have to call it possible microbial growth. We look for conditions such as humidity levels that are elevated, building defects like holes in the siding or shingles, visible discoloration are noted in areas. All those things go in our full and should go in any company's full-scale mold report. Any conditions that would either raise the humidity levels or be prone for more water entry should all be documented, because that's how you're going to fix the mold problem. All mold inspections should include air sampling, as well as surface sampling. Air sampling involves comparing an outdoor sample, which is called your control, to your indoor sample. What are we looking for in those cases, right? We're looking, and the lab is looking for, is there any types of mold that are not found outside that are being found inside the home? And are there any mold types where the spore count is very elevated compared to the exterior, right? Elevated is the best takeaway for this kind of reporting. And then just doubling down on that, what is the source? We kind of just spoke with this a second ago, right? Is it poor grading on the outside? What is the source? Is it overflowing gutters, deferred maintenance? Or is the basement have a sump pump that is spotty, that works sometimes and not other times? Is there a leaking water entry pipe that maybe is actually leaking a little bit of water to where it's not a flood, but there's a steady leak? Are there any ductwork defects? People have probably heard of wrapping ductwork so it's not condensating during the summertime and dripping onto your drywall. HVAC condensation, right? HVAC systems, air handlers in basements leak. You have to make sure the condensation drains are flowing outside or into a drain channel. Leaking pipes is obvious under sinks in bathrooms. Temperature differentials with the siding and the insulation on the exterior. These last two ones, not so common, but they do happen. People that just love to keep their plants watered and it leaks everywhere. And then wet firewood is another big one. So I know Michelle's got a lot of plants, so she's probably familiar with that one.
Yes.
These are all possible situations. So what am I trying to get at is that mold and water in houses is like a piece, it's like a puzzle, right? We're trying to piece together. It's not like testing for radon where you put a box in and it's either high or it's low. Mold and water, there's a lot of variables that need to be taken into account on why is the house functioning as it currently is, right? Is it exterior problems or combinations of exterior, interior? You got to correct the source before you can fix the mold is the end takeaway. What other tools, right, other than our air sampling? Our inspectors and most inspectors will use thermal cameras, right? We're trying to spot water that's on finished surfaces. Water has a different evaporation temperature, right? So it's going to have it's going to appear blue, like in the photo. When you have water that's sitting on drywall or a ceiling space, you're going to see that temperature differential on the thermal camera. Pinless and pin moisture meters are great. Sometimes there's water entry into the property and there's no bubbling on the drywall yet. So you actually have a wet basement. And unless you use a moisture meter or thermal camera, they might not find that or might not see it. Other things, flashlights, obvious, right? Things to help you see where you can't otherwise in dark spaces, and a full visual inspection. Like I said earlier, best mold inspectors are also home inspectors because they understand how the systems of the house work and how they're all tied together and related. They have to be functioning properly, excuse me, so that the house doesn't have conditions conducive to microbial growth. So this is an example from a nice big townhouse in Washington, D.C. So understanding the inspection, right? Think home inspection, but specifically for mold. What are the things we're looking for on site, right? Discoloration, bubbling in the paint, smell or odors, obviously, damaged materials, visible staining, and possible growth. This is the front corner where they just had a lot of water entry from poor grading on the front of the townhouse. Really nice, expensive property that this was just behind a desk. You know, technically we're not required to move materials, but when we can look and go the extra mile and think there's water in a basement space, sure enough, when we pull this desk back, we can see in the corner here high moisture levels, right? High moisture meter readings, as well as a ton of black spotting. So the front corner, history of moisture, water intrusion. The next step is to test it, right? We're going to run an air sample in this space to see if the concentration on the surfaces is airborne, and also take a dry swab sample of that area of concern. So you can see all of our reports and most mold inspections as well. They're going to annotate and identify all the conditions on site so that if there is a remediator or a mold remediation professional that comes in down later, they can look at your report and understand exactly where the issues were and what the conditions were on site the day of the mold inspection. And if you ever get a home inspection and the home inspector says, "Hey, I'm a great mold inspector," or excuse me, you get a home inspector and they say, "I'm great at inspecting homes, but you should really get a licensed or qualified mold inspector to come take a further look." We're always happy to come in after the home inspection has been conducted to look deeper. And so touching on our testing options, right? As I said before, understanding what we're looking for on site for mold, what are we using to actually sample the environment? So to sample that controlled area. So as you can see on the left here, those are our mold testing kits that we use as well as a dry sample. So we run 15 liters of air for 10 minutes, so 150 liters through these air cassettes. Then we send them to a nationally certified laboratory, and they're the ones that are going to compare the exterior control sample versus our interior air sample to see, is it elevated, as well as are there any types of mold spores that are being found on the interior that are not naturally occurring that we didn't see in our outside sample. Some other type of unique sampling that we do, carpet samples, invasive, which involves like drilling into a drywall cavity and sampling the air that's not being breathed in that space, as well as surface sampling. Some other companies will also do tape lift samples. We just don't do those, but doesn't mean it's not a viable option. So what happens after we send all these samples off to the lab and you get a report, right? So this is the details that really helps agents, I think, understand to how to explain things to their clients maybe before you've talked with the inspector or the lab. It always helps if you as an agent, are super knowledgeable in understanding what the results are. So this is from that same example in DC, right? What are we looking for on these final lab results? We're looking for the control sample compared to the basement air sample. This one was actually not elevated. So all that mold that we saw in the corner of the basement actually had not progressed enough to be airborne. Doesn't mean it doesn't need to be fixed. It still should be addressed. It's just not airborne at this time. The swab sample actually came back elevated for Stachybotrys. So mold is present. And when you get this report, that's all the translation is going to read, is that the air is currently not elevated at this time. However, it does appear that that sample that we took on the wall space is active and tested positive for microbial growth. And so these are the different things. Sometimes I've never seen a mold report where there's no identification at all. What does that mean? That means every time we take a sample, unless it's in the dead of winter, right? And we're, anytime you're below 32 degrees, you don't really want to sample. It doesn't give you conclusive results. But there's usually mold in every space we test. Just keep that in mind. It's not a 0.0 mold is not really a thing.
And when you say there's usually mold, it can be there, but not always elevated, right?
Exactly. Yep. So you're always going to see some general kinds, like unless you had a complete clean room where you were taking off all your clothes and socks and shoes, you're always going to transport some mold spores into the house, which will show up. Or if you open a window even or open your front door, mold mold spores naturally occurring. So if you ever get a report back, you're looking, like Michelle said, is it elevated, and what did the surface sampling indicate? So we've gone through our process, right? We've done our discovery. You as an agent or a homeowner has said, I smell something or I see something weird. We've called in a mold inspector or mold specialist or indoor air quality expert to come take a look. We've sent the samples to the lab. They've come back either conclusive or inconclusive. Now, what do we do about it, right? And so this is that differential between that first photo we saw with the tiles with a very small amount of mold versus a big problem. So what might some of the processes be to remediate the conditions on site, right? Fogging or misting, you'll see a lot more of this prevalent in the industry lately. So it's essentially just coating an antimicrobial spray over the area of concern. So fogging and misting is a big one. Topical solution or surface cleaning. This can be worked in conjunction to the other ones. It just depends on what kind of material, how far gone is it, is it salvageable, or does it just need to be removed? Obviously, HEPA vacuums and air scrubbers. If mold is contained and not in the air, the last thing you want is a remediation professional to now disturb a bunch of mold, say behind some drywall or paneling, not having the correct closed conditions as well as negative pressure gradient, and then they end up spreading the mold spores throughout the house. That's why it's so important to get the professionals to look, write the remediation protocol, and then have a reputable company come fix the problem. The next step, obviously, one of them is to remove the affected materials. Think of like wet carpet or the carpet padding or the tack strips under carpet. A lot of times, if you've had a sump pump fail or a water event in the basement, you're not going to restore any of those materials to their day one condition, meaning they're going to have to come in with big, thick poly trash bags, or sometimes other methods, but they need to get rid of all the affected materials because that's just going to spread more mold into the house. Wet vacuums for water, obviously, if you have standing water, reducing humidity, dehumidifiers, and fans. And then the big takeaway is solving the conditions before the remediation take place is the big key. So if you have a hole in your roof, you're not going to come fix the mold and then a month later go fix the hole in the roof. Or if your sump pump is failing, you're going to fix the conditions first that's making the water or moisture issue more relevant, and then you're going to start addressing the mold. So the biggest thing to remember, there's a chain of events that need to take place in the correct order because mold will resurface. Just cleaning the mold up and not addressing the conditions of why it's happening is not a recipe for success. Let's see. Someone asked, do we have any recommendations for remediation companies? We do. We can send those out to you. So if you follow up with us after this, it depends on what area you're living. Michelle's a step ahead. Love it. Regardless of where you live, some companies go all over the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. Other ones stick to a certain state. I know DC has certain guidelines, so some companies will or won't go into DC, but we can give you some referrals for sure. So Another huge question that we get about mold: health effects. Why do I was buying a property and the other people lived there for 20 years and now they're selling, and now my new buyers live there for a week and feel like they're gonna die. They feel terrible, right? Exposure to damp and moldy environments have a variety of health effects, or sometimes none at all. Michelle and I could go stay in the same room one week versus another week, and she has very severe allergies to it, and maybe I have none. So you have to remember. Some people are very sensitive to molds, and other people much more resilient. It just depends. For the people that are sensitive, things can lead to symptoms such as stuffy nose, wheezing, red itchy eyes, skin issues. And especially if they have additional allergies, it can compound the problem. Some physicians will do testing, but right now there's no blood work as far as I know for mold. That's why it's very hard for the EPA to write standards, because it's such a moving target. It affects everyone differently. There's so many different types of mold and the levels. Um, at some point in the future, hopefully we have a more concrete guideline. But for now, it's best to rely on the professionals and people that do and deal with mold every day. If it's with a doctor, we don't typically work hand in hand with doctors, for example, if they're requiring specialty tests. We're happy to guide you along in that process, but that's a very small percentage of the mold issues we encounter are people that are under guidance of a doctor. Some
I
other
always like
issues.
to think about it like being allergic to a cat. Some people are kind of allergic to cats and they might make you sneeze a little bit. And then some people are really allergic to cats. And if they walk in a room where there's a cat, they're automatically going to have, red eyes and they're sneezing. And, so your allergies can be at a different degree. And then some people, it doesn't bother at all. And I guess that's the allergenic molds, the toxic molds bother everybody, right?
Yep. Yeah, and that's the other thing, is that some people, it's a process of elimination. And so I get a lot of clients that will come schedule us for an inspection and sampling, and the air levels are not elevated compared to your indoor air versus outdoor. There are, like I said before, always some degree of mold. It's possible, even though the lab says it's not elevated for you, if you're someone that's hypersensitive, or if you have a client or friend or family members that's hypersensitive, they might have to do things like get HEPA filters installed in the house that a normal person might not have to do. So just because it's not elevated per the lab, there are nuanced cases where clients are just more susceptible and might have to take other precautions to clean the air that they're breathing, if that makes sense. So, end question, right? What do you do to maintain a healthy home? Some certain things, obvious, right? HVAC air filters. There's a wide variety. You can get them as thin as like a piece of tissue paper for $1. I don't recommend those. Or you can get a really high MERV is the rating that they give them. I don't think anyone that I know looks back 20 years later that I've talked to and said, I'm so much further ahead because I saved some money on air filters. It's one of those things, highly recommend. Change them often, monthly, every 3 months. The more the better. You want to make sure the air you're breathing is healthy, and a lot of them, they do protect against some particulates and mold and viruses. So and technology is always advancing, so spend the money. Your health is it matters. The obvious ones, right? Water use spaces, kitchens, utility rooms, bathrooms. Make sure all your overhead fans are operational. You'd be surprised how many rental properties, right? A tenant's not going to care with the house the same degree that you do as a landlord or an agent if you own a property. Always have that on a periodic checklist to make sure the fans are actually being used. You'd be surprised how many houses we step into where there's mold covering the ceilings and the fan's operational, they just don't use it. So they got to be operational and they have to be used. Um, Little monitors in your house go a long way. You want to monitor your humidity levels. So 20 to, 40, 50% is a good range. You don't want to see any higher. You don't want to be in the 60s or 70% humidity range inside. You can always run a dehumidifier in the basement continuously. Keep it on, have a drain line hooked up to it. That way you don't have to empty the dehumidifier bucket. Same thing with moisture. Check for changes in the interior and exterior of the home. You know your house and your body best, so note, record, list changes that you see on a monthly basis. Obvious one, exterior conditions like grading, keeping the soil graded away from the house. Think of the house like a boat. You can definitely pump water out of your house if you think about it like a boat, but it's easier just not letting water get in the first place. So a little annual maintenance, gutters, grading goes a long way. Keep the water flowing away from your house, and you won't have issues later on. Um, just to recap before we plug the chimney inspections one more time, I just want to reiterate about mold. Like I said before, it's naturally present in our environment. It's not something to be deathly scared of, right? Does it surface from time to time? Yes. Is there ways to treat it? Also, yes. All problems have solutions, and just it's always a good idea. Rely on people that maybe know more than you or can at least refer you to someone that can help you solve your problem. Whether it's a small scale mold problem in the corner of a bathroom, or maybe a whole utility room that you can see when you walk into a property that's had deferred maintenance. We're always happy if you don't even order any services from us, if you just need to have an initial consult to see, hey, this is the situation at this property. What do you think I should do? We're happy to always have a conversation with you and either point you in the right direction or come inspect the property for mold. Like I said, we do sampling, inspections, and write protocol in Maryland and Virginia. So if you need anything, just reach out to us. We're happy to guide you in the right direction and make sure you and your clients and families are all have a healthy home and the air you breathe is quality and that you all are taken care of.
Did anybody have any questions before Dane?
Someone said, how about Montgomery County? Yeah, we operate in Montgomery County. We have an office in Montgomery County and Howard County. We go DC, Maryland, Virginia, as well as a lot of our referrals also operate Montgomery County as well.
Yeah. I noticed that the top one is for our Pennsylvania, New Jersey offices, and then the next two cover our Maryland, DC, Virginia area.
And one thing about referrals is, a lot of times those referral companies, you got to keep in mind, the more information you can give them, obviously, the more accurate they're going to be able to tell you before they get to site. So just be transparent. Any notes are good notes. Just record everything and translate it the best you can.
And I see a couple people with their hands raised. Nadia, did you want to ask a question? And I think Skip had his hand up too. Go ahead, Nadia.
Ken and I, we do some property management. We have a property that we have had a mold inspection done on it in July, and then we had it just done again. But our biggest problem as novices is, how do you really interpret and read this report? You aren't given anything that says, oh, this is beyond the acceptable. We have one from ProLab and another one from Whitehead Environmental, and they don't give us they give us the numbers.
Right.
Great, yeah, and that's where you have to be. I'm sorry, Dane. I was just going to say that's where you have to be so careful, because, it's not like radon where the EPA says this is high and this is low. This is okay. This is not. It's all based on the numbers. And, one of the reasons why it's really great to hire ProTech or Peak to do this is because we can't profit from the mold cleanup because we don't have a mold company. So, we can just tell you what we see. And so I always think that's really important to have an independent party that's doing that testing for you, since it's up to that party to interpret what they think needs to happen. Because since there's no EPA standard, the party that does the sampling gets to interpret the results. If you would like to send those over, I'm going to put mine or Dane's email in the chat here. Happy to take a look at those results for you and tell you what we see. Dane, did you have anything to add to that question?
Yeah, and great question, because we have a lot of feedback, and understandably so. If you get a sampling done and that just involves running the air cassette, right, and then getting, is it elevated or not, that might not be telling the whole story. And that's why we try to value ourselves being really quality home inspectors and mold inspectors, is because we kind of know where to look. It's very possible, and it happens a lot of the time, where the air samples will come back and say not elevated, but there is a mold problem in the house. It's on a bunch of surfaces. It takes a lot of surface growth and mold spores to be disturbed to get transported to register a high result. So if you have elevated air results, that means it's a prolific, it's being transported in the air we're breathing. Sometimes the air results will say not elevated, but if we take 3 or 4 swab samples of different walls or under carpeting, you might actually have mold that needs to be addressed. And that's why we try to write a translation report. So when we do it, you'll get a ProLab air sampling and surface report, as well as our interpretation and guidelines and recommendations with that.
That's exactly what I do believe is a translation report is truly what we need. Thank you so much for your help.
Sure, no problem.
Welcome. And then I think it was Skip. Skip, did you have a question?
So in peak, I guess it's for Dane. What's the turnaround time when you're called in to do sampling? Like went from taking the samples to the results. What's the turnaround time?
If we sample on like a Monday morning and get those off to our lab, it's probable that the mold lab reports will come back Tuesday, and then we'll have the final translation written for you by Wednesday. So we try to get it a 2-day turnaround. If we're not as busy and we can get it turned around the next day, we will do that. It's very easy to get it to the lab and get their results, but then we want to write you a thorough translation report. So 2 business days is usually what I tell people. If it's a late in the afternoon, like 4 or 5 o'clock at night, I would say 3 business days from that, we'll have everything turned around to you.
Okay, and the reason I ask, I do a lot of pre-writing the offer inspections, so walk and talk. So I assume that this wouldn't be a good point to insert the mold inspection. If we found something, would be after we ratified, I guess, as I think through my process. The other thing is too, so the report comes back. What you have that translation report, but I guess what kind of real-time support is available? And the reason I ask is, whether they're us or they're clients of ours, we hear the word mold and we don't think of orange skins that turn to penicillin. We don't think of blue cheese. We think of a black toxic mold. So for those people who aren't fluent in microbiology, what kind of support do you have that once we get this translation report, what resources do we have for our clients to get a fuller understanding of what it means?
Great question. So I try to be as accessible as possible. So whether it's just like some clients just need sampling, right? Hey, they've had some work done at this property and they said they've fixed it. We just want to make sure that levels are no longer elevated. Can you come give us unbiased, just sampling, no investigation? It's usually pretty cut and dry. We're just looking at that lab report and then writing the translation. If you're in the second case, right, where, hey, there's a lot of nuance here and the carpet might need to go and what is our cost going to be, I and my team try to be as accessible as possible. So if we send you results at 3 p.m. and you guys need a phone call by 5 or 6, we try to be as accessible, whether it's a 3-way call with you and your client or just you one-on-one, to answer any follow-up questions. Because naturally with stuff with this many variables and it's a moving target and not everyone speaks fluently in microbiology, we try to bridge that gap between questions and answers, some obvious, maybe some not so obvious.
And I just want to throw out there for your timelines also that all of the home inspectors at ProTech carry a sampling kit with them. So if they come across mold and the clients and you decide you want to sample, they can go back out to their car, bring that mold kit in and do the sampling. If that should happen, we do offer, we call it our mold sampling guarantee, in that if nothing comes back in that sample, and not like, I know we said that nothing meaning, there's got to be something in the outdoor sample, but if we don't show up mold somewhere, like nothing's elevated, we don't charge for those samples. We refund the fee. And you know,
And
that's
agree,
just so that you know that we're not trying to upsell the clients on site just to make that extra money. The inspector's offering because they really believe that there is some mold issue going on. Sorry, Dane.
No, you're good. And if you see like if you've ever been in those properties and utility rooms with cinder block foundation walls, sometimes you get efflorescence that is very hard to distinguish from mold. So like Michelle is saying, if we swab something and it comes back as not doesn't have mold, with that guarantee goes into effect out of our caring nature for you and your clients.
Any other questions? Awesome. Well, we really thank you guys all for coming and taking the time out of your day to learn a little bit more about mold. And as Dane mentioned, next month is chimney inspections, and we're just going to talk about what can a chimney inspection tell your client, and talk about like why chimney repairs are so expensive when you have somebody come out to do a chimney inspection, and just the benefits of having like an independent third party, again, like a home inspector or an ancillary services company to help you with those chimney inspections. So that'll be next month. Hopefully we'll see you all again. And thanks so much for coming.
Thank you.
Have a great day. You're so welcome.
Thank you guys so much. If anyone has any additional questions, I'll stay on for another 2 minutes.
Sure.
It looks like nobody has their hand raised.
So I will just speak out. So you have ProTech inspections, and then you have the Peak team.
Yes,
Is the
ma'am.
Peak team part of ProTech inspections or separate?
Good question. So the people that work for Peak, like Dane used to be an inspector at ProTech, but now he is the manager at Peak. And so the people that work for Peak are mostly just Peak employees. Sometimes our ProTech inspector may have to change shirts because we actually do environmental sampling and testing and things for other home inspection companies. So if it's a ProTech inspector, because we are so busy at Peak and we need some ProTech people to help Peak, they will change uniforms. But most of the people are separate.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And we do water quality analysis, radon air testing, mold inspection sampling, as well as sewer scopes is another big one, and pool inspections as well.
And did you guys just add lead on?
Not yet. We're working on doing lead, hopefully for 2024.
Okay.
And if anyone has questions, we're an email or a phone call away, so we're happy to whether it's your house or a client's house or a nuanced question, just give us a call. We're happy to help.
Lisa, I love the kitty that's running around your office. She's so cute.
It's actually Puppy. We love him.
Oh, it's a puppy. Oh my gosh. I see now that he jumped up on your leg. ProTech has lots of dogs running around their office all the time.
Well, we love him. He's a welcome addition most days. Most days.
Every once in a while you hear a ProTech dog barking in the background, and I'm like, you're not supposed to be vocal,
Right. Well, he's actually pretty well behaved.
That's awesome. So, he looks like it.
Yep.
He's getting there.
Well, thanks again, everybody.
I think he's thirsty. Could be, but I don't.
Thank you, guys.